I'm Jarrett Carpenter. This is Future Signal. Back on the pod is Jon Grinnell. Jon, how you doing?
Doing well, good sir. Thank you again for having me on the pod.
Here we are back. I feel like we've already been talking for 3 hours, and I was like, all right, we should just probably record. Picking up where we were before we press record. You had asked about the shirt. This is a free Ross day one. It is one of the few things that I agree that Donald Trump has done well when it comes at least to Bitcoin. I think it was awesome. And you had just said hopefully he'll be at a conference. I think Ross will probably – I don't see a way in which David Bailey's not like in his DMs or texting him or, you know, David had pretty good connectivity with his mother. I'm assuming Ross will be at Vegas. So maybe then – and if he is and he talks, for me that should be the keynote. Yeah. Trump was keynote in Nashville as a candidate. I don't really think – I would personally love to not see too many Trump last names at the conference. If for no other reason, I think that Bitcoin and crypto needs to not give so much weight to people that don't know what they're talking about. They just have big followings, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I
gotta say, I think I still am in disbelief that Ross Ulbricht is out of prison. You know, and
why?
This dude spends 11 years plus in I think a state or a federal penitentiary, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
In I believe New York or somewhere maybe in Texas, but in one day he's out, and the knowledge he can share on that experience and just the values he stood for back, like it's just a wild story to me. So I don't know. I hope there's like. Are there already like documentaries about it? I don't even know. Like,
I don't think there, you know, if there is, there's probably something like a 12-minute thing on YouTube.
Yeah.
But nothing like, there should be a Netflix documentary.
Yes.
Done on it. And actually you've inspired me. So most people don't know this. Yeah. Well, literally most people don't know this, but since 2017, I've actually been pitching Netflix, Hulu, and Amazon on different projects because they have literally billions of dollars to put into these things. And at the time when 2017 was like, I don't know, 800 million into whatever documentaries. And I have a buddy who does documentaries out in, he's out of Seattle, and we pitched a bunch for soccer, primarily soccer focused.
Right.
But I think that Ross Ulbricht one could be fascinating. So I'm going to have my buddy get something up and just send it over because he has a bunch of connectivity in all of those production studios. Because maybe they would bite. I mean, obviously, you'd have to get Ross to be on board. I don't know how public he wants to be.
Yeah.
I think it would be one of those type of documentaries where it's like about someone, but they're only on camera for 5 minutes type thing. And it's a lot of like film and pictures and interviews of other people talking about it. But I do think it'd be a fascinating case because I've always felt that I felt he was made an example of, and I never understood why.
Benchmark case. Yeah. Yeah. It was a scare tactic. I think from the prosecutors. And I mean, there was some like some things in the trial that he was accused of as well. He allegedly had a murder for hire, but he was never convicted of that. Right. And that's kind of, you know, the United States judicial system is pretty powerful in a lot of ways, but it's definitely not perfect. But for this guy to get out after, which I think is the right move for him to get out and now have his life back, right? Like it's incredible. And hopefully that story gets expanded out to more people who can see it. And, you know, it doesn't necessarily put crypto in the best light, so to speak, but
why not? Why doesn't it?
Well, that's a good question. I think there's already a lot of, FUD and misconception out there in crypto with regards to one, it being a scam, right? Generally.
Because it is, right? You know, it is, right?
No, you know what? And we can get into that. In some ways it can be, in some ways the narrative around it is not like unfounded, or there's some truth to it, I would say.
Sure.
There's always going to be scammers in like every single industry, but I think with Ross and that whole thing, like it's like crypto, it it just kind of like reinforces what a lot of the bad news is, right? But I think at the end of the day, it's like perhaps there's a redemption story in it too, where he can actually bring about the real truth, which is this is freedom technology. Like this is actually about redemption. It's a story about freedom. It's a story about self-sovereignty. Am I a movie producer? No. Am I a storyteller? No. But there's something there that can be, I think, really valuable for folks. So I hope that happens.
I hope it does too. And like I said, I'm literally, as soon as we finish talking here, I'm going to call my buddy and be like, hey, you want to get a thing going? Like a 3-pager? Because I had now, this is just one of the things we were talking about before. I now actually have a CV that someone would look at and be like, oh, yeah, this guy can maybe talk about this. He could narrate this. He knows enough people in the industry to build the proper narrative, to get the right people. Because I was saying to somebody the other day, I'm like, man, Bitcoin is, there's the 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Bitcoin is 1 degree of Kevin Bacon. Crypto is probably like, I would say 2, but Bitcoin's even smaller because crypto can be so expansive.
Yeah.
But Bitcoin's 1 degree of separation in the fact that literally from me to Michael Saylor, from me to anyone in Bitcoin is 1 degree now.
Yeah.
Which is kind of crazy. So I think anything that allows someone, an audience that doesn't know anything about Bitcoin or crypto, to understand nuance and see the human side, which is locking away a human being for 11 years. For, as I say, honestly, yes, besides this hit that he had out, which is definitely not a good thing, but he basically created an eBay, a decentralized eBay, where the rail was Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't say go sell drugs and go do all these things, these illicit things, sell illicit things. He just created the space, right? And if you start selling illicit shit off Etsy because you can on Etsy because you can use Bitcoin, like does the person from Etsy then get life in prison? 2 sentences? Like I'm very, very happy he's out because I think it's the right signal. And I just think moving forward, there's going to continue to be pioneers that are building stuff on the internet because we're still early to the internet in many ways for humanity that are going to, run into stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. A lot of people don't know this about SilkRoad too. Not that I was on it, but I wish I kind of had explored, at least like looked at it or used it, not to buy anything, but just to see it. I think not a lot of people know SilkRoad actually had guidelines. They had rules. It was very specific about like nothing involving children, nothing that would hurt another person. Those were kind of the guidelines and the rules that had set out. But yeah, in a free marketplace, sometimes bad things can happen, but the creator of the marketplace, are they solely responsible for that? Or is it the individuals who are doing the bad things? So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think 99% of the stuff that happens on Facebook is probably okay.
Mm-hmm.
But there's that 1% of someone's bullying someone else. There's that
There you go.
1% of some conspiracy theory is shared on the internet and people literally die because of it. This has happened in various parts of the world, especially where there can be hate between ethnic groups, between religious groups, especially around political elections is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, but yeah, 99%. So then does Mark Zuckerberg get life in prison because he created the medium through which this stuff would transpire? I'm not there, but I don't think so. But I'm glad Ross is out. But yeah, I was honestly thinking, I was like, all right, what shirt am I going to wear? I'm on mic. And I had the company shirt on that I work for, and I was like, I don't want to, that's not like, let's keep a separation of church and state. So I threw this one on. But this one does get looks because there's another sister shirt that goes to this that was given out at Nashville and on the website that says, Free Ross Day 1, vote Trump or something like that. And so it goes away from being something that many people have no idea about Ross. I always like this because it allows people to ask a question. Hey, who's Ross? And what's day 1? And then you get to talk about, hey, well, I think no matter who the president is, I think that this guy should be let out of prison. But the second you put vote Trump, and the vote Trump was in like red and blue, so it was red, white, and blue, it just then changes things a lot, as you can imagine. So,
Oh yeah. Big time.
oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
One of the things I wanted to talk about today was Ethereum and
Yeah.
Solana. I wanted to ask you, and let's use a hypothetical. You are starting a company, a Web3 company, and it sounds like your neighbor is
Yeah, little leaf blowing action.
Just a little leaf.
Come on, it's spring, right? Like you
I was
don't
gonna
need to
say
blow
you
leaves.
should have told your neighbors you're recording.
I should have.
You should have. The light should have come on at the top of the house. Um, what was I gonna say? Yeah. So okay, let's live in a world where you're. I want to create a couple scenarios, and I'll throw them to you and let you start. We'll start there. One of them is you're a Web3 company, and you and a couple people get together. You're gonna start a company, and you're looking. All right, what rails do we want to use? And I don't know, maybe it's a play to earn video game, maybe it's an NFT, maybe it's a DAO, maybe it's any type of these decentralized structures. One, which one would you use between Ethereum and Solana? Let's start there and I'll bring some other scenarios.
All right, so I'm going to say that's a trick question, and I'm going to say both. No, in an open world where it's a lot of the values that Ethereum developers might hold true are very similar values that Solana developers might hold true, which is I just want to use a blockchain to get the most users as possible. We just want mass adoption. We don't care what chain we use. We don't care what we do. That said, like if I had to pick between the two, I would probably offer a more pragmatic kind of response to that and look at what the market is saying and just base it all in facts. So we know that from Electric Capital's crypto report that they put out every single year that the number one blockchain that developers are building on today, or at least in 2024, which we'll call a proxy for today, roughly is in every single region of the world, every continent is Ethereum. It's the number one platform. The number two platform across all those regions across the world is Solana. What is happening with the regulatory front? There's a lot of things in the works. The stablecoin bill, we know that crypto is becoming more and more widely adopted by Congress. We know that conversations are accelerating. There seems to be a warmth and openness in DC, particularly. And yes, I am biased. I'm speaking as someone who lives in the United States, that the financial world in the United States is giving the green light to crypto. And so that said, like, what do we see happening with regards to, as my guy over here is just blowing leaves, is we see that there's major things happening with regards to Ethereum and Solana specifically that people are building on. And so I can't really give you like that one or the other, but I think that when it comes to speed, if speed matters, if I'm creating a gaming company, I'm going to be looking at Solana. If I'm going to be creating something that absolutely requires the highest throughput, lowest latency transactions, I'm looking at Solana. If I'm looking at something that would run a global financial system, global, like decentralized, global, highly secure, high uptime, been around, battle tested, I'd be looking at Ethereum. So it really kind of just depends on your use case. That said, like you look at stable coins, right? Like that's going to be, I think, a huge use case coming up. Circle is processing a ton of volume on both Solana and Ethereum for USDC. And then you look at there's new like policy efforts coming out with Solana with regards to like how they're working with DC to kind of influence policy there with their kind of ecosystem. So I think it's still depends on the use case, but I've always been since it launched in like 2014, 2015 timeframe, I've always been a very, very big fan of ETH. But that said, I think Solana is very, very important to the ecosystem as well.
Yeah, I think that was a great way to answer it. It was looking at the use case, right? Okay, if it's gaming, it's this. If it's going to be a financial product that's globally adopted, like USDC for me is my stable coin of preference. The crypto I use these days are just Bitcoin and then USDC on base. I think we mentioned that in the last episode you were on.
Yep.
Solana's so interesting to me though because since its inception, it's just been called the ETH killer. And I feel like it's growing in that direction more and more from what you just talked about. This was the thing that the developers are most building on. The second is Solana, first is ETH. It's right there. My next question is, I just want to continue to ask you hypotheticals. So my next one is, you are um, you're looking you run a conference. Let's say you run CoinDesk's Consensus or you run Blockworks Permissionless. I think the two biggest crypto conferences that they have. Which is the one that you would most want to be? And they both come to you and they're both like, yeah, we're going to give you $10 million for, title sponsorship or whatever that is, to be on all the lanyards and stuff. I have my lanyard from Permissionless here. Actually, I can show you what that looks like. But for this one, and I'm giving them free press here, but Futureverse, and I think it's backwards, but Futureverse, Ilium, Polemos, whatever. They spent a lot of money to be on this and to be everywhere. You're in the bathroom, you're literally washing your hands, and it's like, brought to you by Polemos. It's, whatever. Which one would you most want? Like, which one do you think holds the most cred in the street and is the coolest with the most amount of people? Because I think what people are building on and what people are interested maybe isn't always the most like social currency, if that makes sense. Which one do you think is cooler? Is cooler to be around in crypto, if that makes sense?
Out of those two, or just
out of those two? Yeah. Let's just focus on those two. I have a couple other hypotheticals, but out of those two.
And you said Blockworks Permissionless and
CoinDesk's Consensus. I'm just saying, if you're just live in the world that you're running a big conference, and they both come to you and they're both going to give you that 10 to 20, they're going to cut the 10 to $20 million check to give you that money so you can put the conference on. Which one do you think is cooler? That's what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah, I think if I had to again choose between the two, I think that for me personally, I think that I'm here for the technology, right? And when I think about what a blockchain is, I think of a permissionless, transparent, accessible, self-sovereign freedom technology that helps and empowers individuals no matter where they are globally and creates more opportunity for them and enforces property rights. And I can go on and on and on, but like I think the idea and the premise around like permissionless and the type of spirit that invokes is super cool. That said, I don't know I'm not super up to speed exactly on, so maybe you can enlighten me on CoinDesk's kind of conference there, but I know I would imagine that may be a little bit more like financial focused, and not necessarily on like the new kind of technological Web3 underpinnings of crypto, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I went to Consensus in 2023. Got my lanyard right there, just flexing on everyone right now. And it had a similar feel as Permissionless. Permissionless felt a lot more grassroots, more like, yeah, we just whipped this up in the last 8 months. We're running on EVM. We're doing this. We're running and gunning. We got a VC who loves us. We've got multiple non-doxed, 23-year-olds that have $3,000, 3,000 ETH in a wallet, and we just put that up. It's a little bit more. It felt more startup-y as opposed to like Consensus. And this is not to shoot down Permissionless. I think Permissionless and Consensus are equally as valuable to the overall ecosystem, to what they bring. But then Consensus was a lot more like, big names. The Ripple, the Stellar, the Circle getting the $1 million conference spot where they're just, whatever. But to be fair, that's Permissionless has that too. As far as Blockworks, they have that too. So the idea is like, I'm just trying to get like, what's cooler in the street? You know, what's like, you're at the bar and somebody walks up to you and you're like, hey, what's your name? You're like, my name's John. They're like, oh, what are you working on? You're like, I'm working on a project that's built on, or I'm working on a project that's built on, and depending upon what you say, obviously, I think they're very different changes as how they're received. So that's kind of where I'm getting like, which one's going to be cooler in the streets?
Well, let me answer that like in another way. I think if you just again look at the metrics from, and I'll re-index on the State of Crypto 2024, which is like Electric Capital puts out that awesome report every year, and it's backed by other sources as well. And it really, one of the interesting findings of that report is that new developers are actually flocking to Solana. Solana is the fastest growing among developers. So if you're looking for like what's a word on the street, what's hip, what's cool nowadays, for sure Solana is legit. Like it's definitely gaining a lot of new developers like quickly. And that said, there's also, a lot of people that are hacking and building on layer twos on Ethereum. They're trying to build their own layer two. They're potentially trying to build on top of a layer two. They're trying to build different experiences that integrate smart wallets and create that Web 2 feel in a Web 3 native kind of way. And again, this gets back to like, what's your personal opinion, right? Like, I think for me, my personal opinion is I really, as someone who has built Ethereum apps, that's kind of where I gravitate. That's what I gravitate towards. I think the permissionless kind of like almost small group hackers, the ones who are building on nights and weekends and shipping like legitimately interesting projects, right? Like you can go to ETH Global's website, you can go to some of the hacker posts, like some of the projects that they're building, especially with AI, is pretty incredible. Solving for like identity on the web, kind of problem spaces, solving for health data problem spaces. We just saw 23andMe collapse and all your genetic data is out there in the world and getting sold to the next bidder. So I just think that that stuff is personally really exciting to me. And that's probably why I would probably lean towards something more like permissionless that's totally unique and totally new. That said, you need both, right? You need to have like established players who are building the industry out and working with governments and working with institutions. So it's all part of the maturation process of the industry.
Did you have your DNA in that cloud up in 23andMe?
I sure did. I deleted it though.
You?
I did. Yeah, I deleted it. Thankfully, I found out how to do that on some Twitter thread. Put it out. I was like, oh, I better do that right now.
Yeah, I saw that too, and I've been seeing those threads. Like those things are like wildfire because I think millions of people in the United States had used 23andMe over the last decade. I actually never did, just because I was worried about it going to the highest bidder. Once you give your information to a private company, they can do whatever they want, and they can sell it for sure. So this idea that people are like, oh no, they're always going to keep it confidential. It's like, no. Once something is out there, it's out there.
Yeah,
That's just how it works,
how it works. Client server architecture of Web 2, it's how it works. And if you look at just a double click on that point, is as it relates to crypto, if you look at the AI tools that everyone uses nowadays, right? Just to get into that for a sec, all the stuff and all the information that you put out there is in fact on their servers. All those conversations that you think are private on their servers. One of the things that I've been kind of curious about is Venice AI. And Venice AI is a new platform launched by Eric Voorhees. And essentially it's ChatGPT for total and complete privacy. Uncensorable AI is how they kind of market themselves. So if you want to have a private AI experience, they have their own token as well. So it's an interesting use case of where crypto and AI converge.
I need to look into that. Back in 2017, when I first got into crypto, I got one of my money mentors into crypto, and this is a guy who's just liquid, okay? And he, early on, because the more money you have, the more private you want to become. Now, some people will become very public facing, but when it comes to their money and where they put their money, they become exceedingly private. They don't want anyone to look. So one of the first things that he said to me, he was like, he really got into like first of all, the anonymous versus pseudonymous. That was very obvious to him. No, like the wallet address is actually pseudonymous because that's now who you are. And what is the name? I cannot think of it. I can look it up if I need to. What is the name of the biggest privacy coin? Can you help me out?
Monero.
Thank you, Monero. He bought a lot of Monero early, and he was like, when the shit hits the fan, I can't tell you how many wealthy people are going to want this over Bitcoin or over Ethereum or over other things.
Yep.
And when this is now 2019, 2020, 2021, I guess 2020, 2021, when the .eths came into play,
Yep.
he was like, that's never going to work. He was like, I don't think that's going to go anywhere. And he was like Nostradamus, because I'm there buying as much .eth as I can, just the way I still buy to this day .coms I find interesting. Because I'm like, I've been buying .coms that have to do with quantum computing for years, just because I'm like, oh, there's gonna be something that's gonna have like, quantum basketball or something. Like, who knows, right?
Totally.
So very interesting. How do you spell it? Is there Venice? Is it like
Exactly. Venice AI, and you can visit their website. I can give you the exact URL.
is it Venice.ai? I love the .ais.
Venice.ai. VENICE.ai.
Clean.
It's a super beautifully designed website, and basically they kind of have like for those who are curious, like it basically is like a proxy. They run a proxy server that interacts with open source LLMs, and they have no way technically to read or tap into your conversations. So they connect you with an open source AI.
Do you create an account like you do with OpenAI and ChatGPT, and then they just don't? Okay, because I think that's really interesting. One of the conversations that's definitely been happening at the company I work for, and at almost every tech company, I've seen articles on this, is companies saying, "Hey, don't use ChatGPT, don't use Claude, don't use Gemini, don't use Llama, don't use any of these things that are controlled by tech, because as you said, the stuff does sit there, it lives there, and you should never put anything of value. Like if ever I engage, even for personal stuff, there's nothing that's of any importance that if like the internet knew about, I don't care. You can't. There's nothing you can glean from it.
Right.
Venice AI, I hadn't heard that, and I didn't know Voorhees was working on it. So, is his team Web3? I mean, I assume it's got like that taint to it. If it has, especially like you said, they have a token.
Yeah, I don't know the exact mechanisms of the token, but I think you can stake VVV. That's the symbol of the token. You can stake it VVV. You can stake it V cubed. You can stake it to, I believe, pay for tokens in the LLM definition of tokens. In other words, you stake,
exactly.
right? You stake your VVV for using the LLM Venice AI.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I do need to look into that. I'm very interested about that, because I think, like, thinking back to the Money Mentor making that comment in 2017, looking at Monero and being like, that's going to be a big thing. Now, Monero still hasn't, from a price appreciation standpoint, still hasn't done anything. It's still one of the only proof of work coins that is out there that's in the top 100. I don't know if Raven Coin is still around. That was one. Caspa's obviously come online.
Wow. Flashbacks. Yeah.
Throwbacks here. So, okay, my last thing on the Solana and Ethereum, and you've done a great job. So let's see. We've looked at what would you, if you were starting a Web3 company, what would you do? Then, well, how would you align if you were working with a conference, or basically what's cool in the street? And then finally, you have however amount of money, and you can only put it in Solana or Ethereum from a personal investor standpoint. And this is not financial advice. This is a hypothetical. But which one would you put it into, knowing that you have to hold it for 5 years, which is a long, long time in this game? That is actually, it is a freakishly long time. That's like holding real estate for 30 years. People don't understand that, but.
Oh man. I gotta tell you, I don't.
That's a tough one. Ethereum's taking a bath, my guy. All the Bitcoin maxis are just like, because when you look at the Ethereum Bitcoin chart, it is rough. Rough.
Yeah, Bitcoin, I think Ethereum it's for the first time it hit like less than $100,000 in revenue. And yeah, like
MRR?
Well, I think
monthly?
Like through like the gas fees paid, like block space, like paying to actually use the Ethereum blockchain, it has generated less money, which is actually no bueno, right? Because in that case, what's the incentive for a validator to stake, or what's the incentive to actually run a node, right? Like you kind of need that price to appreciate. right?
It's totally true. It's the same thing where I was on a space last night and we were talking about how you could do a 51% attack of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And a guy came on and he was trying to posit and he was like, look, what if I don't really want to go down the rabbit hole, but he was like, what if you didn't care about the Bitcoin price?
Mm-hmm.
Because at that point you could do different things. But obviously it's illogical because we have to think about financial incentives because that's how the world goes around. But he was like, basically his thing was like, if Bitcoin gets to 200 trillion in market cap,
Mm-hmm.
there could be some country that comes along that wants to basically try to set up a 51% attack and use Bitcoin, use fiat, use economic energy to do it, but they understand that by tumbling Bitcoin, it would create a better world for them because of their sovereign nation's position in the financial globalized world. It was an interesting thing. All that to be said, follow the incentives, you'll understand the outcomes. I completely agree. So you're saying if there's no longer, basically the price appreciation is such crap that there's no longer point in me to keep my Ethereum there. The question I have, and I don't even know how you track this then, how many people are leaving Ethereum for Bitcoin right now?
Mm. I'm sure there's probably a way an imperfect estimation on how to track that and how to actually see some kind of funnel or carryover from that. But I think that it's kind of a complicated question to answer on the premise of like answering the question of like, how do you get Ethereum back? How do you make Ethereum great again?
Make Ethereum great again. This is going to be a great clip. Thanks, Jon.
Make Ethereum great again. And I think it's already great. I think that's actually a little smoke and mirrors to say Ethereum's not great. I think Ethereum is actually already great. And what's happening right now is you have a lot of L2s that are being built on top of it. Hint, that's a good thing. You want people, you want institutions, you want projects, you want talent, you want things built on top of your platform. And to say that, oh, well, that's a bad thing because, and like that's bad. It's the price of Ethereum sucks. Trump launched his meme coin on Solana, therefore ETH bad. Like that's just kind of like not really galaxy brain thinking. Like galaxy brain thinking is looking at the bigger picture as always, right? Like look at the long-term chart, look at the age, look at the number of developers coming in, look at who's building what on Ethereum. And look at the institutional adoption as well. That's where the serious people come in and say, okay, let's make this a thing. So I just think like there's so much that goes into like, I don't know, like psyops with like price and people get tripped up about, oh no, the price is so bad. No, it's not. It's really not, in my opinion. And a lot of the L2s coming on Ethereum, they say, oh, those are just cannibalizing all the costs that could be going to Ethereum. Well, if only they just use Ethereum as a security layer to run a pretty sophisticated technology blockchain stack, that's a good thing, right? Like I think that, and if you have all these L2s that are working towards a future where there's interoperability, which is another huge problem in Ethereum, is the L2s just don't talk to each other. That's another solvable problem. And so I think we're at a tipping point where a blockchain like Ethereum and other blockchains that come in have the potential to actually run a global financial system in a way that can tokenize equities, can tokenize real world assets in a really sophisticated way. So that's where the like digital oil kind of analogy comes in with Ethereum. I still think that holds true, and I've been long bullish and will continue to stay bullish on it. Now you're hearing my personal opinion come out a little bit on where I stand, but I think there's a lot of important innovations outside of Ethereum as well that absolutely push the industry forward, and I'm rooting for them too. I don't really pick favorites.
So if you had to, you have a certain lump sum of money, 5 years, it's got to be in there.
Back
You're
to
going
that
with ETH.
question. You know,
I'm not going to let you off the hook.
no, you're
You
not.
gotta
I
answer
know,
the
I know, I
question.
know. You put your, that's the ultimate vote, right? Vote with your
That's
wallet.
totally the ultimate vote.
Yeah.
People, I'm convinced. And before you give this, I'm going to give it a thing. I am convinced, and I've just looked at the math, and I've made many episodes on this show talking about zero point 0.1 Bitcoin. I've been looking a lot at addresses, and there's only there's less than 4.5 million addresses, wallet addresses, addresses, not even wallets, that owns more than 0.1 Bitcoin,
Hmm.
which is not a lot of Bitcoin if you've been in the game for 5 years. If you've been in the game for less than that, it's a lot of Bitcoin, right?
Yeah.
In my opinion. All that's to say, of all the people on X and all the people you know in the space that talk about Bitcoin all the time, I'm just using Bitcoin as an extrapolation to get to Ethereum and Solana,
Yeah.
because Bitcoins are maxis and normally they're only putting their money in there, whereas many other people in crypto, they own like 60 different cryptos because they're just like, well, I don't know what's going to hit.
Yep.
And my point there is, if Bitcoin maxis, which what's my point? My point is, I know a shit ton of Bitcoin maxis. You know a shit ton of Bitcoin maxis. If you're watching this or you're listening to this, you probably know a shit ton of Bitcoin maxis. Also, just educational, if you're listening to this, a Bitcoin maxi is someone who's a Bitcoin maximalist. They're only going to put their money, if they put it on the blockchain, into basically Bitcoin as a store of value. Okay. I am convinced that most people who make a lot of noise on the internet about Bitcoin actually don't own a lot.
Mm.
And I know for a fact, working at a Bitcoin company, I know people who are very loud about Bitcoin, and I know their DCA, and it is lower than my friends who are never on the internet, and they are DCAing way more. So all of that is to say, I think it is very, very interesting to think about like what people say what people say they're into,
Hmm.
and then where they're actually going. Because like you said, you really do vote with your wallet.
Yeah.
And so I think that there are people that dog Solana on X, but they know their bag is 80% Ethereum long.
Yeah. Yeah. And that gets into like the tribal like mentality,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
crypto, it's one of the crypto's very well established known problems that it has, where you have a bunch of people that are trying to build an entirely new technology, financial, internet paradigm. And there's infighting in between that to get there. There's also competition, right? There's legit competition to get there and capture value. So at the end of the day, I'm a man of peace. I think we're all building towards something that's better for humanity, and at least better than what's out there today, especially in the financial system and the kind of client server architecture of the internet, where companies truly do own your data. That's a well-known fact. But like, I just think like, yeah, that's that's one of the trickier things and one of the harder things to navigate, especially as you're new to the system, or you find a community that you like and find out, hey, there's like a rival over here that, I don't know, we're just trying to build our stuff and have fun and invest and build a better technology, but there's a little bit of a little infighting. But back to your question, I'll answer that. I think I'm personally, if you're asking my personal opinion.
I'm asking your personal opinion. That's not financial advice.
All right. No, NFA, DYOR, et cetera, et
Yeah,
cetera.
NFA, exact. Dior.
I just think again, pragmatically, I think if you take a principled, pragmatic approach to what's going on with regards to internet, with regards to on-chain adoption, where developers are going, I was convinced that, nothing would take Ethereum's steam away. Nothing would slow it down. Nothing would prevent it from top dog. And there is legit a lot of competition out there. There's a lot of different platforms that are putting up numbers with developers, putting up numbers with addresses, putting up numbers with institutions, with regulators. If you had to ask me, 6 years ago, 5 years ago, hey, would Ripple still be a top, 5 coin? Would they still be in conversations with, major, especially internationally? I believe in Asia, in the Asian continent, they have a ton of adoption with XRP. It just speaks to the fact that it's very, even if you have a belief, a hard set belief, even in Bitcoin, I would say, even though Bitcoin's got a huge lead and almost nothing's like it, is you never know. You never really know in crypto. It's just, maybe that's the skeptic in me or like the cautious optimism, but I think like I would go like 50-50 at this point. And not to give a boring answer, but I don't have particularly insanely strong conviction or belief in one or the other. I'm more of like an index kind of investor on the approaches that a lot of these companies are taking. That said, if I'm building something, my personal opinion, if I'm building something, I'm building it on Ethereum. That said, I'm also very closely watching the next generation and what are the young developers building and what are they interested in? What are the conversations in DC like? So you have to kind of factor all that in, but yeah, hopefully that helps answer your question.
It does. I'll let that go because you went 50-50 and that's fine. You did bring up something I think is really important, and that is the idea that like maybe Ethereum just becomes the security layer.
Yeah.
And then all the L2s are the things that people actually think about, but the Ethereum just moves so far in the background that it just becomes the internet.
Mm-hmm.
When I was younger, I would say, "Hey, I'm going to be on the internet. Can I get an hour on the internet?" And I literally have to make sure no one was on the phone and the dial-up and the servers. I think that there's a future as well for Bitcoin where Bitcoin becomes. There's a lot of development that's happening on top of Bitcoin. People can go back and forth. Some people hate this. The purists hate this. Miners were like, this is great. The more congested network, fees are going to go up. We need fees because the block reward is meh. And if the price is meh, right now, the Bitcoin mining economics, and this is probably not a comment for everyone, but if you're in it, you know it, is dog shit. It's really difficult. It's really not competitive. Many of the machines you have online are not making money, not a good time. But I think out in the future, I love what you call the galaxy brain. I'm trying to think farther in the future. And I do think Bitcoin is going to be something that people will use, whether it's an inscription or it's an ordinal or it's a rune, whatever it is, to put something physically on a public, permissionless, transparent ledger that you can go reference. I think this is where housing deeds are going to be. I think that when we talk about real world assets, I think that like for the biggest things, housing, those will go on the Bitcoin blockchain. And I do think, for example, that there will be some L2 that's moving stuff for a real world asset. And that's how I'm going to like sell you my Honda for 6,000 USDC on base when we meet in a parking lot. And we'll do that. And then that will go up and it will live in a base contract or something like that. Like I do think, I think the future of real world assets is really interesting. And it's like, people are like, oh, that's not going to work. I'm like, Larry Fink is running around on any stage you can possibly see him on, and that's the only thing he says. RWA, 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 RWA. Oh, RWA and Bitcoin, RWA and Bitcoin. So
Yeah.
I do think there's a future where Ethereum and Bitcoin are so OG, and they have just passed I think it's like, what's it, the Lindsay test, because they've both been around 10 plus years and they're still growing, that they're going to move into the background behind, and everything else will be in the front kind of battling it out.
Yeah.
Like today you have basically Instagram, and to give you an idea, you have like an Instagram versus a TikTok. Oh, who's going to be the best video? But it's like no one cares because it's on the internet. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So,
Totally.
well, okay, you did a good job there. You split for the retail investor. You went with Ethereum if you're building something. And then remind me again for the conference, did you go with Solana? I think you did.
No, I went with
Did you go with Ethereum?
like if between the CoinDesk one and the other and permissionless.
Well, yeah, just in general, if you're running a conference, you know, if you're running a cool conference, I was giving those as examples.
Yeah. I think like I think one of the most interesting conferences out there is actually like DevCon or even the hackathons, like ETH Global. I think there's really, but I think Solana also has an interesting one called, it's called like Breakpoint. And they've held it in like Portugal one year, maybe somewhere in the US this year, but that's an interesting one to follow too. So yeah, not to be both sides of the fence, but it's all good to me. Like it's all a good thing. And then on your point earlier, just really quick on an interesting perspective on like, you think that Bitcoin is going to be like that settlement layer for, did I hear that correctly? That Bitcoin will be the place where you put your deed, your Tell me more about like what you think there.
Yeah, I think Bitcoin. I got a couple ordinals. I For a long time I was very much in crypto, and as I recently shared, I just got burnt on so many things, and I was just like, I need something that from an investment standpoint, I don't have to think about. From
Yeah.
like a dev standpoint, everyone's all in on this one thing because I found that no matter what it is, whatever you focus on expands.
Hmm.
And I found that in crypto, everyone was just, let's put it this way. When 21 and 2022, and then I'll get into what I was talking about the settlement layer. When 21 and 2022 happened, when the price went down,
Hmm.
in 2022, in May of 2022, give me some rope. I'm not exactly sure the day. I think it's May. Do Kwon happened. Terra Luna dies. Crazy, crazy exodus of people.
Mm.
Fast forward to that October, FTX, SBF, the whole thing blows up. Billions of dollars overnight just evaporate. Now, people are getting their money back now. You love to see that. I lost money in BlockFi in and around that time. And what I saw when the house was on fire is everyone run out. Now, when a house is on fire and everyone runs out, some people keep running. Some people turn around and say, how can I help more people get out of the house? How can we think about rebuilding? What can we do next? How do we make this situation better?
Yep.
And in crypto, I saw a lot of people run out and they just kept running. And what they were running to, they weren't running away from the fire. They were then running to AI. And I saw a lot less people in Bitcoin in around that time. They ran out, they looked at the fire and said, all right, how do we help? How do we continue to make Bitcoin better?
Yeah.
So with that said, I think that Bitcoin is going to be a place that is going to garner so much trust because sovereign nations are going to have their own Bitcoin reserve. They're going to be mining Bitcoin. It's going to be something you can use not only online, but in shops around the world. It's going to be a ubiquitous brand and brand is trust. That's it. Brand is trust. Trust is brand.
Yeah.
So people are just going to feel like, you know what? I just signed a deed on this house or whatever. I own this, and I know other people are doing this. And now there's these really easy ways that I can put this up and write it onto a block so I can go find it at any time in the mempool, no matter where I am. So it doesn't matter if it's burnt. It can't be stolen. It's not like, one of these bearer titles or whatever where like whoever owns the shares owns the company. That whole day is over, right? We're not Wells Fargo in the late 1900s running around like with horses and we've got gold in the back and we've got like our 6-shooters. Like we can cryptographically block stuff off that is even going to be quantum proof, So that's where I think that like long-term things that are of uber value, the wealthy will start to do this. The wealthy always move quicker. The wealthy will start to do this first. The wealthy, just like on the planet, were the first ones to start to use email, even if that's middle class America compared to like all of Latin America in the 90s. So I just think the wealthy will start to put things. I think Porsche tried to do an NFT back in like 2022, 2023. It completely flopped. I don't know if you remember that.
Yep.
But there's, when you have unique runs of things, whether we're only going to put out this many Porsches or this many Birkin bags,
Yeah.
I think those things will start to go into Bitcoin first. And then there'll be enough good products where it's like, yeah, I have to pay $50 and I can get it up in this block and it will be lumped up and there'll be a way for me to access it. And that way, even if I, lose my seed phrase or whatever, I can just still go reference the document. I don't know. Yeah, that's how I think about it. Cause I think it's like there's 2.1 quadrillion sats essentially. And so each one of those could be a cubby for really important information that you feel like is worth putting up there. So
I love that. So your claim is that your belief is that if you really want something you can trust, if you're using a blockchain for trust purposes or to kind of index in a reliable way that you can certainly bet that it's secure on Bitcoin, then people are going to probably do that and put it there.
yeah, if there's that belief as you've just built. And the other thing is it has nothing to do with trust. They'd trust the brand and then they'd realize it's not about trust. This is not a trust situation, actually. I trusted the brand to get me farther enough to make the decision of whether I put it there. Then as you know, it's not a trust, it's a verify. I can just go verify it. I can go to the mempool or I can go to all of the new things that are going to be built. So you can go see every single sat on the thing. And so I have these ordinals from an artist, a South African artist who now has a studio in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
His name's Jonathan Schultz. He's wonderful. He does great art. And his art is obviously up as an ordinal. And part of this gets into the fact that the block size is not that big.
Yeah.
But you can put up like a very, very small kilobyte thing that, you know, turn your marriage license and that just goes up, or like a death
Yeah.
certificate. You know, my uncle died. I really want to enshrine that forever. You know, I, I just think that like the Bitcoin blocks moving forward, and even we're, you know, using sats under 100,000 sats, which is, it still blows my mind how someone's even doing that. I mean, that's crazy. Um, I just think it's going to be the place. It's going to be the new Library of Alexandria.
I love that.
Yeah,
Wow. I haven't
yeah,
heard that analogy before. That's a good one.
yeah, and it won't get lost.
Yeah, exactly. And I was asking that because like I think that's an interesting perspective that I haven't heard before, but I had been hearing a lot about like ordinals. I had heard they were super expensive, but it was kind of
There-
like a new innovation that Bitcoin had put out and a new feature. And I guess it gets me thinking about like relative to Ethereum, you know, like why do people believe that Ethereum is the main spot? Well, let's take the case of like putting equities. And maybe it's that like putting equities makes sense on Ethereum because it's a financial use case where you need really, really low fees, really, really low latency, speed and execution of trades absolutely matters a lot. And it needs to be very, 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 very secure as well. No downtime, etc. And I think like it's just interesting to know like, well, you probably could, and this gets to like my lack of understanding of like how in some ways Bitcoin can be like Ethereum. And I think like there's even new ways on Bitcoin to do like smart contracts. So it's just like it it's amazing to me just what these blockchains are capable of. And then the last point I'll make is to your point earlier before this about not really needing to know that the crypto is there. Like it's all going to kind of like zoom out. It's all going to be abstracted away. And I think that's a huge, very important point that like it's just going to be the internet. All these protocols are going to be running. They're going to be the new internet. And these blockchains of the new internet is going to be running on blockchains. That is literally the definition of Web 3.0. Client server architecture 2.0, blockchain based architecture 3.0. So I cannot wait as someone who educates people all the time on how to use a crypto wallet, on how to deploy a smart contract. I cannot wait until we get to a point where so much of this is so invisible and consumers are naturally going to gravitate towards whatever is cheaper and faster and maximally secure. And whatever that is, it's going to be, you know, literally powering the entire internet. And then the listeners of this show might be wondering like, oh wow, well how do I like get exposure to that? Well, they also offer tokens, right? Every single one of those platforms we just mentioned, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, they all offer tokens. So if you're an investor, you're thinking about the future of the internet, what's a better investment than on the internet? What if you could invest in the internet? You know, so yeah, exciting times.
but yeah, not financial advice, right?
No, 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 no,
Absolutely not.
not at
Absolutely not.
all, not at all.
Yeah, as far as like sitting here now, I do not know of any successful smart contracts that have been run on Bitcoin, but I know that there are people trying to crack that.
Yeah,
And I think you totally are spot on with the equities being on Ethereum because of speed. And I think like if you own an equity, normally you're not owning it for more than 2 years, 3 years.
yeah,
Equities are for traders. I think like when people hold long term, sure, you could own Tesla for 10 years because you're super convicted. But the idea of putting something for me on Bitcoin is like that's something that you don't. The point is you put it up there so it doesn't move.
mm-hmm.
Whereas I think you put something on Ethereum because you want it to move eventually.
Yes, well
And I
said.
think that there's a yeah. I just think that that's like a categorical like the way I think about Bitcoin is it's a cemetery, you know. And the way I think about Ethereum is it's a storage unit,
Yeah,
and they're just two different things. I may move, I may want to take this with me, I may want to,
mm-hmm.
bridge this over. But with Bitcoin, it's like I think it's gonna be really cool one of the things, I have a master's. I don't even know where it is. And most people have their master's on their wall because it costs $1 billion. I want to take it, I want to scan it, and I want to put it up on the blockchain.
Yeah.
And be like, I know exactly what block it is in case someone asks me where my master's is. Like, there it is, you know? And so
Take a look. Yep.
yeah, take a look. Cause and there was a guy actually at NFT NYC 20, oh man, what year was that? 2023. And he got up, his name's Josh. I forget his last name, but he got up and he burnt his Harvard certificate he got. He took a class at Harvard and got a certificate. He got up and burnt it. He's like, why would I want this? I can put it on the blockchain. I already have. This is how we're doing it. So that's what we started his talk.
Cool.
And I just completely agree with that. I think real world assets, when we think about that, we think about a house, we think about a car, the deed. We think about things that are really valuable as far as like they can be sold for a lot, but there's other things that are really valuable that can't be sold for a lot that I also think are going to be on the blockchain.
Yeah.
These are marriage licenses. These are death certificates. These are birth certificates. These are your college or master's or PhD or even your high school diploma. These are timeless things that, where's my high school diploma? Poof, gun to my head. It would take me hours to figure out even where it is. So, we are coming up though on the hour, and I need to make sure you get back to living life. Any final thoughts? We did. Gosh, we started with Ross, then we went ETH, Solana. We touched upon Bitcoin. Yeah.
No final thoughts. I think that for the listeners listening to this, as someone who's working professionally in crypto right now, I mean, you don't have to look. Both of us, really. I mean, you don't have to look really hard to just see that there has literally never been more momentum in our industry. And so when you see narratives in the news about any price action, oh no, Bitcoin tanked to 83,000, or Ethereum's 99% reduction in revenue and block revenue, like those are all local minimums to what is otherwise a insanely strong long-term trend on this new technology. So just the regulatory front, it was horrible, and now it's very, very supportive. The price of Bitcoin 7-8 years ago was what, like a couple $100. Now it's 10x, right? Like, you just look at the progress on a long-term scale, and you look at the news and what's really truly going on. I encourage everybody to take a look at progress up until this point on the industry. All the charts are up and to the right. And it's never been a more exciting time. So I'm fired up. Let's keep doing these chats, and hopefully, we'll inspire some others to get involved.
I think so. And I couldn't agree more. Starting in 2017, when I got in, to now, where the White House has an entire team surrounding this. They brought in industry experts. There's executive orders on it. They are absolutely growing. If you look at what actually this new administration is doing, many of the things they're trying to do are kill a lot of stuff, defund a lot of stuff. One of the only places they're trying to avidly grow and innovate is in Bitcoin and crypto, bar none. Yep. So it's a weird time for you to be bearish against such a bullish industry. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe. Listening on podcast platform, please go ahead and subscribe. Follow us at Future Signal Pod across socials. And Jon, thank you once again. You'll be back on soon. I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, Jarrett. Appreciate it. See you, everybody.